me. And we're giving you an update about this plan that was announced by Biden on Friday to bring an end to the war in Gaza. Now, it seems that the discrepancies that we noted between what Biden was saying and what the office of the Israeli Prime Minister was saying, these seem to have been more significant. And so there's been some friction between Biden and the Israelis about this. Netanyahu is saying there's much bigger gaps between what his position is and between what Biden had announced, and so on. So we're going to talk a bit about this. So Mark and Richard, why don't you start us off?
Yes, it's quite an extraordinary situation right now. Biden went on TV on Friday to announce this deal. And it kind of sold it like, oh, I've discussed this with Israel. We're all agreeing, same page, blah, blah, blah. And then he starts making points like, I hope Israel will agree with this. And I push all parties to take advantage of this deal, blah, blah, blah. And now Netanyahu, after looking at it, is thinking, hang on a second, I never said I wasn't going to finish off Hamas. The deal that Biden proposed is just effectively, I don't know, it's a two-state light solution. I don't know what he's up about. But to me, more importantly, it looks like the re-election team has managed to sneak in a speech for him to be read. Of course, he probably doesn't realize what he reads anymore. So whatever is in front of me, in front of him, he reads it. But it seems to be just, come on, guys, I'm running out of time. I need to go on the trail now. I need to come out of the fridge more often in order to do this election business. So I need to be seen to appease the Michigan lot pretty pronto, because running out of time. Trump is is biting my heels. It's just bizarre, just utterly bizarre.
I think the mere fact that it was Biden presenting this deal is in itself bizarre even before you begin. And of course, a lot of this speaks to how diplomacy works. And the fact that you've got these layers that take place. You've got the two sides in any diplomacy. You've got all of the negotiators working on their behalf or for intermediary or third parties, and then you've got who presents the deal at the end of it. And you can't ultimately fudge reality at any stage of that process, and that's what's being attempted here, really. Because whether it's a subjective presentation of a deal by Israel or by Hamas, it's going to reveal what the key points are. And simply taking Biden's speech as the answer to that, which is what the Biden administration want you to do. They're saying, don't listen to what the Israelis and Hamas say, just listen to how Biden presented it, because that's really the truth. All that means is you're being asked to suck up the creative con that is a carefully worded PR speech that attempts to conceal the contradictions in reality of surrendering land or surrendering the situation in Gaza, withdrawing your troops on the basis of not knowing whether you're going to receive hostages or not, whether they're going to be alive or dead or not knowing whether Hamas is going to continue or not knowing who's going to control the region afterwards, militarily or in a governance capacity. And all of that goes completely against Israelis' clear total victory needs from the outset of this conflict. It's such a paper thin attempt to pull the wool over people's eyes, to be honest, if that's not mixing my metaphors. It really is a shallow attempt to persuade people that there is a deal on the table that people have already agreed to. And the only thing that's clear is that Hamas welcome a deal, because Hamas will welcome any sense of a deal. Because what are they welcoming? They're welcoming capitulation. They're welcoming the fact that terrorism works. That's what they're welcoming. It doesn't matter what's written on the sheet of paper or what's said on the screen. They're just welcoming the fact that they're pushing Israel one step further into a corner. And that's all Biden's achieving through this mess.
Yes. And so John Kirby came out and said that he had no idea what the gaps would be between the Israeli position and the American position. And I mean, there's still a lot that I guess we have to kind of uncover about exactly what went on here. But my best guess is that it's an attempt by the Americans to have kind of pushed Israel into a corner, so that it seems like they're committed to this version of a peace deal, even though it's not aligned with what the Israelis want at all, and that Biden decided if we take the initiative on this, then they're going to look really bad if they go against this now. That I mean that's my best guess as to why they would do this, because as you say, Richard, it's strange that it's coming from Biden. You would expect it to be announced by the Israelis. And when Daniel and I were talking about this on Saturday, I guess it was, there was very scant detail about this from the Israeli side. We saw that the Israelis had said that there had been a plan proposed by the diplomatic team, the Israeli negotiating team, but there was nothing about what the detail was. And it seemed like that was validating that this plan had come from the Israelis. But the whole thing has really just been a complete mess. And as you say, it's no wonder that Hamas wants to welcomes this deal, because it completely goes along with what they want. But I don't know, do you guys have any thoughts about do you think my description's right, or do you think that something else has gone here? Do you think this is just the Americans trying to push Israel into a corner?
I think you're right. I mean, if you look at what they suggest, it feels like a plan put together by a 5-year-old on I don't know, on dope or something. It's talking about first of all, the release of hostages is a kind of sideline thing, and it's done on quotas. It's like Hamas has kidnapped people in Israel, and now that they are trying, part of the deal is decided how many females, how many old people and sick people, sick hostages. I mean, probably all hostages will be sick by this time. If anything else, they'll be traumatized to an inch from the death. And then there's this woollies talk about a permanent end of hostilities. Israel forces withdraw from Gaza, release of remaining living hostages. It's like, can you hear what you're saying? Then it goes on to reconstruction of Gaza. At no point he mentions Hamas. At no point he mentions, hang on, shall we take the people who are responsible for all this accountable? No, not even a mention. And what's even more sinister is this kind of suggestion that there's going to be a ceasefire, and somehow there's going to be an agreement, and somehow Hamas will come to the table, and somehow there's going to be a resolution between Israel, and somehow they're going to live all happily in peace and holding hands, walking towards the sunset. This is just insane. I mean, well, one of the points is saying, oh, you should accept this because then you can send the people from Israel who live in the north of Israel, they can go back and stop being hit by Hezbollah's rockets. It's like, oh, wow, that's really nice of you. The whole thing is badly done. It's not credible at all. And all it does is actually it puts Israel in a real position of now they're looking even more as they're the bad guys because they don't want to go for this deal. But this deal is absolutely rubbish. Absolute rubbish.
And that point that Mark is making there about the somehow is something that Ayn Rand pointed out frequently in lots of articles and writing about the idea that you've got some wish fulfillment having an effect without initiating its cause, believing that you can just solve something because you want to visualize the end to it without the necessary steps that are required to get there. And of course, the fact that you will not be able to please everybody and get to that goal. And you certainly should be trying to please terrorists, obviously. I think this I've heard this first phase described as a humanitarian phase under in inverted quotes, in the belief that you can only have a humanitarian phase for the hostages that happen to be alive at this moment. But of course, Hamas hasn't even told anyone which hostages are alive because they trade in that doubt, fear, and the use of humans as currency. So if they're not even going to do that even at the most basic level of humanity, then how are you possibly even considering negotiating with them? And then, of course, you hear that the other side coming out in terms of what the word that seems to be coming out from people like Sinwar himself, which is that he simply wants to perpetuate this war because, as he sees it, Israel is losing the PR war, losing ground internationally and becoming a pariah state, and the best solution for him and for Palestinians, especially used as the fodder that they like to be used as for the cause, that they should simply prolong the war as long as possible. And at the same time, you're negotiating. At every stage, it's full of holes, totally lacks credibility, and of course, there shouldn't be a negotiation in the first place, which you can't be said too often.
Mm. Yes, well, that was the other thought that I had about this, because Netanyahu's, wanting to distance himself from what Biden's saying very much, and that only makes sense because if this were to be Netanyahu's plan, then I wonder whether there wouldn't be a small revolution in Israel, possibly, at least from certain sectors. But even what Biden, I keep mixing them up, even what Netanyahu's plan seems to be, I think is still not very good, or at least I want to hear what your opinion of it is, because he's still going to go along, it seems, with this 6-week ceasefire, which has the potential to basically just be indefinitely delayed into the future, because he wants to get the hostages back, which is, of course, understandable. But so often, the way that this war has been waged so far, it's been waged in a manner where the lives of Israeli soldiers are really just put at the bottom of the priority pile. Delaying to going into Rafah, the whole mess in getting the war started in the first place, the initial ceasefire, which Hamas violated straight away, but then the Israelis still had to abide by, all this kind of stuff. So do you think there's a case that we could make for allowing a temporary ceasefire to try and get the hostages back, or do you think that it's a complete mistake from the off?
Well, I think it's a con. I think it's a con from the beginning, because the 6 weeks is fake. It's a fake. You can make it any amount of time you like, but if you open the door to the idea that it's extendable and indefinite, you're basically saying that it's a ceasefire until, and that makes the 6 weeks utterly irrelevant. So for people to even quote that or continue to quote it, they're lying either to themselves or to the rest of us. And of course, the idea that you can wipe out Hamas while still trying to free those hostages, however painful it is for the families, etc., of those hostages. When Netanyahu has said the key aim is to make sure that Hamas can't carry out another October the 7th, of course, can't do something similar. Now, Biden takes that part of it and spins it himself to say, well, they already wouldn't be able to do it for a good while, as if that's some kind of an answer to the situation, as if that is Hamas defeated, but accepting some sort of marginalized or kernel of Hamas left, or pretending that we're even at that stage, is a further lie, because it just doesn't stack up. They're still in control. The Palestinian people still haven't relinquished their support for Hamas. They're still determined the shots when it comes to speaking on the international stage. All of the negotiations that are taking place. I noticed it was today, I think, that the foreign minister of Egypt was speaking about this deal in Spain. And why is he in Spain? Of course, we know why he's in Spain, because Spain's one of those countries that's been very quick to support the terrorist side of Hamas here in their support for the Palestinian, the Palestinian cause, if you want to call it that. So yeah, all of it is just it's sickening, to be honest.
To even have negotiation with Hamas, to me, is totally deplorable, morally repellent. You cannot negotiate with the people who started all this mess in the first place. You cannot negotiate with people who have been quite clear about killing every Jew and destroying Israel. they still hold the hostages. The hostages are not held in some place, undisclosed location, unknown to everyone. Gazans are holding the hostages, the few hostages left alive after the October 7th. And the premise is this deal is done on the basis that Hamas can no longer repeat October 7th. Therefore, Israel should stop trying and destroy them. Is stupid and laughable. Okay, they might not be able to organize such a prepared attack like October 7th, but what if they just kill just one person? What if they start going out killing random Jews? And I mean, this whole premise is totally idiotic. Totally ignores the fact that Hamas is the force that's trying to create instability. Is the weaponized political institution from Iran who's causing that kind of instability and trying to destroy Israel. How can you expect a state whose job is to defend its own citizen to just give up like that because Biden has got an election on? And it's just so annoying, so incredibly.
I think the good thing that Biden did say, but I got to caveat this, is you've got to caveat everything that comes out from these kind of negotiations, is he made the point that there's been too much criticism of Israel in terms of accepting the deal. And he pointed out towards the end of the speech, I think, that it was, people should be calling for Hamas to prove that they are, prepared to accept a deal. But of course, we've seen all this before, and it's been Hamas that's broken the deals in the past. It's been Hamas that broke the peace on October the 7th itself. It's Hamas that after the disengagement from Gaza, started continuing to fire rockets into Israel, when that was the point when they were supposed to also show that they were the big guys, and that this was a new dawn in 2005, 2006. And it clearly wasn't, and they clearly proved the exact opposite. And yet they're supposed to have some other chance again after the atrocity of killing 1,200 Jews.
I think, to be honest, the big mistake was made by Netanyahu at the end of February when he decided not to go into Gaza and give the stupid break for Ramadan. That was the point where effectively he's lost the war, because not only he's lost enough time to allow all the critics and the PR to be created against Israel, but it's now people like the protesters and all the marches that we see in the West have now taken over the stage, if you like. They are the loud voice that they've been allowed to strengthen all the time and effectively present Israel as the bad actor in this thing. And in Biden's speech, the most incredible thing was when he mentioned that if Hamas fails to uphold his deal, the part of the deal, if Hamas fails to uphold the deal, Hamas is a bunch of terrorists. You cannot trust them as far as you can throw them. They are hiding right now in the deepest bunker on the planet, hiding and letting their people die so that Israel looks even worse on the war stage, and they admit it. How can you be president of the United States or Secretary of State of the United States and not realize that Hamas will never uphold the deal? Because if they really want a ceasefire, they could get it overnight. They could have got it months ago. 240 days later, we're still here, and we're still dancing. Well, I'm not, but Israel is still forced to dance at the tune set by Hamas.
Yes, I agree. I think that for Hamas, it's very clearly a victory if they're able to get Israel into a diplomatic sort of negotiating position now. And that doesn't just go for Hamas. Any of these sort of ragbag terrorist groups always would like to get the stronger, more justified side into this kind of position, because that does confer onto them a kind of victory. Certainly for Hamas, if they can just get Israel into a stalemate, then they have won. And there was a statement that was made around this, which was made by a civilian, it was interesting because it was the only statement of clarity that I've heard about this deal, or so much of it has just been a lot of fluff. So this is made by a lady called Yarin Sultan, who's a 31-year-old mother of three who ran from her home in Sderot on the Gaza border the morning after the Hamas attacks. I'm quoting from an article here. She says she won't go home until Yahya Sinwar and Mohammed Daif are no longer free. And she says, this ceasefire will kill us. We will free the hostages, but a few years from now, you will be the next hostages. You will be the next people who get murdered, the women who are raped. All this will happen again. Now that is something that I wish that the leaders in their various positions now, the leaders of Israel, the leaders of the US, could appreciate. And surely I guess the ultimate point is that they do know that, and yet they continue to act in all these ways that are evading this basic reality that if you do try and get to a ceasefire with Hamas, then in a few years' time, this will all just happen again. There was a ceasefire on October the 6th, after all. And so even though I'm saying that I wish that they knew that, ultimately the thing that makes them just so immoral is that they do already know this. And that's the thing that's so disheartening about all this. But what do you guys think?
When you hear Biden talking about talking about Netanyahu and Israel and describing it as a quote, their unidentified notion of total victory. Now, it's a very clearly identified notion of what victory entails. You just don't like it. You just know that you want to capitulate to the enemy, which makes it impossible. So you try and pretend that the goal of Israel, the goal of Netanyahu, is not what it is. And that's see-through as a strategy, to be honest. And then lots of the elements of what I've heard proposed. I think Gallant proposed one thing which was described as humanitarian bubbles. This is for the period afterwards. Now that sounds very much like a COVID legacy piece of naivety, with some of its same traits to it. Which is the idea that in this particular case, the idea that you can create certain geographical areas within Gaza, certain limited bubbles, and only approved people from the Palestinians who are supposedly known not to have Hamas connections would be the ones who could receive and help distribute aid to the Palestinians within their limited geographical area. Allegedly, because can you honestly believe any of those steps that are necessary to see that working? And then, of course, you've got the other stuff in here, which is the ratios that are spoken about. Of course, they're not defined. They're not defined within this, but the ratios, which is I loathe the concept even of returning hostages for Palestinian prisoners. And what is that ratio? That is a ratio of how much you're prepared to poison your principles. It's basically how much you're prepared to say that good isn't good anymore because we're prepared to trade a little bit of evil for it, literally trade it, and that speaks volumes about what's wrong right now.
Yeah, if Israel is failing its duty to protect its citizens. What does it say about Biden? There are American hostages in it. Is he going to do something about it? Is he going to allow Israel to get them out? The reason why earlier on I mentioned the fact that sounds like it's a reelect campaign team member who wrote the speech is because at some point, I think on the third point, on the third phase, he's talking about a better day after, or perhaps the second phase, a better day after. That doesn't sound awfully like build back better. We rebuild Gaza. I mean, to think that far ahead at this point, to think that you're rebuilding Gaza for the same people who perpetrated the horrors of October the 7th, it's just repellent. It just says, okay, let's stop for 10 minutes. I've got an election. It doesn't care about the destruction of Hamas. It doesn't care about getting the hostage out. This is purely cynical political move, clearly designed to wrong foot Israel and force them to come on the table for a deal that they should never accept.
Yes. What do you think then? because Netanyahu still clearly agrees at least with some of this. Do you think that the Israeli negotiators gave to the Americans something like this deal, and then the Americans kind of focused in on certain bits of it and exaggerated it in this kind of effort to put Israel into a corner and to make Israel look bad? Or how do you suspect this kind of ended up coming around? It's a big deal that Biden's gone out there and said this, and then there seems to be all this scrambling to clarify exactly what the situation is. It really is a whole fudge of it.
Yeah, it is hard to tell exactly what's happening there. But bear in mind also that Netanyahu himself is kind of tied by the coalition, and he's been trying to hold it together as people keep mentioning, the desire to leave it and collapse it, whatever. So I don't know whether it could have been Netanyahu himself trying to, brief the US or something in order to deter the people who want to destroy the coalition from, now focus on this new issue, creating effectively a new problem that they have to deal with. I don't know. It's whatever has gone there, somebody hasn't done his homework correctly, I think.
I mean, in any set of negotiations or diplomacy, there's always a public phase and a private phase. I mean, that's true in any area. So what people are saying, they won't negotiate on in front of a podium is not necessarily what they're saying when it comes to the backroom deals through third parties, etc. That they're saying, behind the scenes. But having said that, also people stealing a march on the opposition's position, or on even, supposedly your allies' position here, or in an attempt to nudge them in a certain direction, that also is a diplomatic technique, and that can also backfire horrendously. Or even if we can assume various strategies were in place in order to get this through, or make it work, or force people to do what they're reluctant to do, it doesn't mean it's going to work, and it doesn't mean it's going to not achieve the opposite result from that, and cause a bigger animosity between allies at the end of it. So it remains to be seen as to whether this is a turning point in any series of directions, whether it's towards a deal, much as we might all here, loathe that concept, or whether it actually emboldens Netanyahu and Israel to say, no, look, total victory is our aim here. The three goals we're trying to do: destroying Hamas militarily and as a political force is, step one. Removing the hostages is step two, and ensuring that Gaza can't threaten Israel in the future is the third part of that, and not temporarily, and not this week or this month, but permanently. That's what they've got to return to. But you're never going to know from the outside. You're only going to start to be able to read the interactions between the leaders, and see what comes out in terms of the backpedaling, which could start to reveal the fact that somebody's said more than they should, gone further than they should, and now needs to retract.
So we have a super chat from Jonathan, who gives $5 and says, "Any deal is a victory for Hamas." Thank you very much, Jonathan. And I agree with that sentiment completely. Well, I guess just on what you were saying at the end there, Richard, about, where do we go from here? I mean, I guess there's two possibilities. Is either this plan ends up being a complete dud and it gets resigned to the waste paper bin of history, as the various plans that have been proposed so far and have failed have been. Or this is going to be the thing that's going to cause us all a headache on the channel for the next few months, as the terms of this supposed plan get bandied about in the media, almost certainly inaccurately and vaguely, and then maybe eventually this will get put into place, but probably not very quickly. What's your guys' sense of that? My best guess is that it seems quite likely that there's going to be something made of this, because Biden has gone out there and made this big speech. But I guess that by itself doesn't lend it much more plausibility is to be put into action. So maybe the more wishful part of me is just kind of hoping that this will be go into the waste paper bin. But what do you guys think?
Well, as you said, it can't possibly be a dud plan, because the president of the United States went out there, had a speech, and talked about this deal in no half terms. Normally, if you put like a fake plan or something to prompt the other side, it would be done via diplomatic channels, behind the curtains, really. But to get the president of the United States to go out and do that, to me, suggests that this is some kind of strategy. But the problem is this strategy has all the hallmark of the cock-up. It doesn't seem to me like whatever they wanted to do went according to plan. It can't possibly be just a, if you like, a fake deal to push one of the two parties. It's just too open, too much.
And one of the channels from Hamas has suggested that they want it as a more detailed proposal in writing. Now, obviously, if you're really going to get to a full understanding of it, that's what's going to be necessary. But of course, Hamas may be saying that because they're taking Sinwar's line, which is essentially that they want to prolong this for as long as possible. So they start with, we welcome the deal. Now we want to see it in writing. And now we want more concessions. And of course, the whole proposal being put forward does kind of sound like it went through Chat GPT and somebody said, try and make this sound like it's more conciliatory. Try and make this sound like two sides agree where they don't. And that's been, the result popped out. But, of course, it's crap in, crap out, isn't it, in terms of computer terminology and reality as well.
Mm. So Daniel sends me a statement by Matthew Miller, who's a spokesperson for the State Department, who says the following. The world should know, the Palestinian people should know, that the only thing standing in the way of an immediate ceasefire today is Hamas. The proposal on the table is nearly identical to what Hamas said it would accept just a few weeks ago, and it's now time for them to act. Now, I guess I agree with him that it's certainly Hamas who's the one who's standing in the way of any kind of ceasefire. And actually what I'd like to see is a complete surrender rather than just a ceasefire. But if he's right that the plan that's been announced by Biden is actually very similar to the one that Hamas said they would accept just a few weeks ago, I don't know. It increases my sense of exhaustion with all of this just nonsense around diplomacy. And I think the way I feel about negotiations and diplomacy and all this kind of pressure that gets put onto Israel, although this might sound harsh, is that it only has the kind of, it can only have the force that it has because Israel allows it to have that. Clearly, Israel, if it wants to go into Rafah, can go into Rafah, no matter what the ICJ says, no matter what any of these kind of organizations say. They only really have any effectiveness if Israel agrees to allow that to happen, if Israel gives their words any meaning or any weight. So I just feel like Netanyahu should stop interacting with the with the American diplomats around this kind of stuff. I appreciate there are probably consequences for that kind of thing, various things that he feels like Israel needs that he's going to get from the Americans and all this kind of stuff. But I just feel like Israel isn't going to get any goodwill from the international community. So it needs to stop trying to court it. It needs to stop trying to play all these games. And it should just get on with the war effort and get it over with, because the longer this goes on, the worse it'll be. And then we have another super chat from Jonathan. He gave another $5 and said, any compromise between good and evil benefits evil. Paraphrasing this Rand. I certainly think that's true as well. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, for sure. And of course, we know that evil needs to parasite off of the good to exist at all. And its only power is to take, compromises from the good. Without that, it is impotent. And it could have been proven to be impotent with a strong conviction from the beginning, without this capitulation to humanitarian, whistling that we've seen right from the beginning, which simply prolongs the misery for everyone involved, including the Palestinians, who will never be able to, move on and live properly, same as the Israelis won't be able to move on, live properly until the threat of Hamas and terrorism is defeated, and the ideology that sits behind it is also defeated, that being Islamism or at its core, Islam.
It's hard to see how Netanyahu can pull this one back, to be honest. I think the only option for him is either to give up and say, okay, well, we can't do this. So effectively declare Israel open to more and more October 7, whether they are in the same format or it's going to be a trickling of victims every other day or something like that. Or he can just flick the bird to the international, so-called international community and the United States and just go in. People will never be on Israel's side as certain people anyway. Whatever you do, you cannot keep sacrifice your own young people in order to appease the Palestinians. If they're suffering, if some Palestinian civilian dies, it's in their own making. They chose the life they're living. They chose the action that they committed. So why should Israel worry for 5 seconds about the consequences of the Palestinians' actions? They should just go in, get it over and done. Of course, as I said earlier, if he didn't dilly-dally for the Ramadan period, just went into Rafah and got it done, by now we will be talking about, how do we deal with the occupation of Gaza? Is it going to be Israel or somebody else? But here we're still sacrificing young Israelis for the sake of some Palestinians who will do that again. If you let them get away with it, if you don't change the way they live, they will do it again. And they promised it. Why don't we listen to what they tell us? They're going to do it again and again and again.
Yes. So I see people in the chat are arguing about who owned the land going back thousands of years and so on and so forth. And I see Spirit says that DNA and Bible arguments aren't land claims for either side, and argue about them is a waste of time. That's my take. I agree with you, Spirit, and I hope that everyone else in the chat stops talking about which group owned this then and which name it was, whatever. This is the stuff which is completely irrelevant and which unfortunately dominates so much of the discourse around the conflict, but not our discourse on the channel. We reject all that nonsense. So we'll move along. But okay, guys, I don't know what else to say about the deal as such. I think we've kind of plumbed it. Do you guys have any other thoughts, or should we leave people there?
I think only to add that one of the things that the US has used as its argument is not only what I said before about the fact that an October 7th couldn't happen again in the short term, which is simply not good enough, but also has argued that the Lebanese border will be so much better off if you accept this deal. It'll then be peaceful, and then Israelis can move back into the north of the country. All of that is just. It's risible, isn't it? Quite honestly, and it's pretending that you can get a short-term result that is good enough or will satisfy people enough in order to evade once more the longer-term issues which are at the core of this. And if we're talking about history and how long this is all dragging on for, in terms of the many decades, then it's because of that constant evasion. It's because of that refusal to look at the long range that has led to it lasting so long. And it's a refusal to face up to what is good and what is evil and what is right and what is wrong and what is individual rights and why they should be supported. All of the things we've been talking about on this channel, and all of the things that Ayn Rand defends as the core values which underpin everything.
Any other thoughts, Marco?
Well, the depressing thing out of this is that the United States of America is effectively telling the world, just appease these Islamic inspired terrorists wherever they are, and let them get away with murder, let them kill us, let them destroy civilization, because, well, they've been there for a bit, they should be there. It's just insane. This kind of limp spine that we see from the West is exactly what's going to cause all the problem that we'll face in the next few years. Of course, the appeasement of Iran in the late 70s was the very first opening shots of this, and we're now seeing on steroids. We cannot have the United States of America, the only moral country with a constitution designed to minimize the state and maximize individual rights. We cannot afford it to effectively tell the people who fight all sorts of dictatorships to stand down. It's just insane.
how much is being trashed in this whole process, and how many red lines, even the concept of red lines ceases to mean anything, as we've seen time and time again, as well as the bolstering for whether it's countries themselves, and of course as far wide as North Korea or China or whatever, and also whether it's individual groups or the march of people who wish to change other people's opinion through force, because that is ultimately what you're cheering, and what you're supporting and what you're capitulating to.
Yes. Okay, guys, we'll wrap up. Thank you very much for watching. We'll keep you updated with any details from the deal as it goes along. I don't doubt that there'll probably be a lot of petty back and forth between the Israelis and between the Americans. But if there are any major developments, we'll keep you updated with those. I don't believe we have anything going live at 7. Daniel can just quickly let me know if we do. But otherwise, we'll be back tomorrow with the Daily Objective and the reality show. We'll see you all then. Bye-bye.
Bye.